Tests are one method of assessment for student learning. In the online environment, a more authentic method of assessing students' learning is usually with assignments. However, objective-based tests do have their role within student learning in the online environment because they provide immediate feedback to students. When you're covering a particular discipline and need to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that everybody has a common vocabulary, common understanding of some of the basics before you get into some of the more in-depth issues in your discipline, the use of objective tests provides some immediate feedback to the students. Make sure from your perspective as a faculty member that everybody does understand some of the basic terminology that you're using in your modules or in your discussion board posts or in your more authentic assignments. So the use of objective-based tests is not necessarily a bad thing within the online or in the classroom environment. So let's look at tests for just a moment. Just like with most items, you really control the test from the control panel. And in this case, I've already created a test. Now, it's a very trivial test. We can look at it very quickly. It's a test. It's got one multiple choice test item in it with the feedback on whether they got it right or not. So it's just a real trivial example of a test. We'll cover actually creation of tests and some of the options there in a separate module. But to insert a test into a course, it's created in the test manager now, but it's not available to students. It's not placed anywhere. And that technique is called deploying a test. That's Blackboard's terminology for it. So let's say that we wanted to put this test into our modules area. So we go into modules, and right up here on the top bar we see a link to tests, and so that's what we're going to put in here. So we choose test, and Blackboard keeps track of tests being used. It only allows you to deploy a test in one location. That's because at the time that you deploy a test, it also creates a gradebook item, and you can't really have the test in 3 different places because you wouldn't know which gradebook item to link to. So it keeps track in here. Once you use that test and insert it, it won't be available in this list anymore. If you need to have a test available, the same test available in multiple locations, very easy. You can just copy the test. But we're going to insert it in here right now, that demo test, and I'm going to submit it here, and it's telling me that it's added successfully. That's very easy to do. What I wanted to look at in this tutorial here is in these test options, because this is where you give a lot of power to the tests. It's also where a lot of instructors make some choices that they regret down the line. By default, a test is made not available. So if you're going to have it available to students, you need to turn it on. So you'd have to make the link available. You can add an announcement for the test. If you're deploying a test and you want to know at a particular time and you want students to know about it right then, you can include an announcement. You can allow multiple attempts. You can either allow an unlimited number or a specific number of attempts. And later on, we'll look in the gradebook. There are ways to capture all of those attempts in the gradebook and decide whether or not you want to count the highest or the most recent version. Here is the, I'm not going to allow multiple attempts on this one, it's too easy. Here is the area that instructors usually select and usually causes them problems down the line, and that is forced completion. In fact, I've argued with Blackboard that forced completion is the work of the devil and should be removed, but they haven't seen fit to do that. What this means, forced completion, is that the test must be completed the first time it's launched. On the surface, that appears to be a security issue. It appears to be that, that'll keep students from being able to start the test and then log off, go spend a couple hours looking up the answers, and then come back in. It doesn't really do that, and there's another way to handle that anyway. What forced completion means is that if a student starts the test and for any reason they get logged off, they drop their internet connection, their dog chews through their Ethernet cable, whatever, they cannot complete that test. You have to intervene in order to reset that test for them. So forced completion is an option that is not recommended by the TeleCampus for use in tests. Instead, what you can do, if you're concerned about them going off and looking up answers and coming back, set a timer for the test. Give them an hour to do the test. The timer runs on the server, doesn't run on their local machine. If they log in here and they start working on the test and they copy down the questions that you've asked them, they log off, they go off somewhere, they look up the answers, they come back an hour later, that test will not be available to them. They will not be able to get back into that test in order to complete it, because the timer is running on the server side. It keeps running even if they've logged out of Blackboard and turned off their computer. That timer is still running over there. So that's one of the keys in this in the test options area is don't choose forced completion and instead choose to use the timer.